Boom. What's up, freaks? How you doing? So, I'm about halfway. I'm about 6 miles in on my bike ride this afternoon, and I wanted to share and hopefully encourage somebody. I look at how, I guess you have the same opportunity, looking at how easily you can become distracted by the things that are right in front of your face. And I remember when I was in the military, I'd go on ruck marches, and I hated them. But I would go. I loved them, but I hated them because I was infantry, so it was sort of part of the deal. But I would go on these ruck marches, right? And I would hear the grumbling and the complaining from my own mouth and from the dudes in front of me and the dudes behind me. But one thing that permeated the entire movement when I was on these ruck marches in the military, the one thing that kept me moving, was the fact that I knew that if I fell back, I would be necessarily, not just inconveniencing, but I would be forcing labor on other people. And these dudes are the same dudes I ate and slept with and lived with and walked with and talked with. Everything I did with these guys. So it was sort of like 50-50. Like, part of it was like, I don't want to let these guys down. But then during these ruck marches, but then there was this other part where it was like, I care less about letting these dudes down as much as I do about what they're going to do to me when I fall asleep. Right? It was crazy. It was this weird sort of, it was group correction, but it was also admonishment. And there was this, it was more than camaraderie. It was more than just like, let's do this thing together. Yeah, we're buddies. It was like, look, if you mess up, I'm going to kick your ass. That's what they used to tell me all the time. And it happened, man. It happened a lot of times to guys that I knew. It happened to the guys that would be the Blue Falcons, the guys that would be the problem causers. Those guys would be the ones that would always get hemmed up. They would always get in trouble. On the ruck marches, they would be the ones that would always be falling behind, always causing problems for the other people, always complaining about how their boots hurt or how their rucksack didn't fit right or how it was too hot or too cold or they didn't get the... Nothing was their fault. You know what I mean? Those guys in the unit, it was never their fault. It was never, oh, I screwed up, I made a mistake, so now I'm the one responsible. It was never like that. Far too often it was like, listen, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and if it doesn't go my way, well, you know, I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to whine. I'm going to moan about it. That's usually the consensus. That was the general idea. But then I got out of the military. I mean, this was all after my deployment. I got out of the military, and now here I am. I mean, this is almost, what, 8 years later out of the military, 8 years. And I still sometimes can feel those same guys behind me and in front of me when I'm on my bike. And it's hard. It's tough because you want to hear, you want to hear those guys' voice behind you saying, hey, keep going, keep going. But then you also want to keep hearing the voice, and that's like, if you don't go, I'm gonna kick your butt. If you don't go, I'm gonna take care of you. You better go because don't be a Blue Falcon. So I wanted that, but I also hated it. I hated it for every second I experienced it because it was the worst kind of hazing you could ever imagine. It's what would be commonly called today bullying. So that brings me to what I really wanted to talk about, which is this idea that bullying is sort of bad. I mean, hold on, don't get too freaked out. Like, I think bullying, by and large, is atrocious and terrible. But what I am talking about is this sort of buddy check mentality that existed in the military that now is being called bad. It's not good for the sensitive at heart or emotion, right? But I was fat when I was active duty. I wasn't as fit as I could have been. I definitely wasn't as fit as I am right now. I'm more fit now than I ever have been in my whole life. But when I was in the military, it would have been right for somebody to be like, hey, don't eat so much food, fat ass. Sorry if that offends you, but that would have been good for somebody to say to me, and they did. And you know what it made me do? It made me stop eating food, which, you know what that did? It made me lose weight, which, you know what that did? It made me easier to work out, which, you know what led from being easier to work out is I got more fit. You see how that worked? So it turns out this little oikos, this little environment of men, they did a lot of terrible things and they conditioned me to a lot of bad behavior, but it was also good behavior. It was also good decisions. So I don't know. I guess when you think about things that you miss from the military veterans, right? It's easy to to dismiss the difficult things, right? It's easy to push them off and say, well, that sucked. That was hard. I never want to do that again. Well, you know what? There's some guys I know right now, for sure, who are experiencing some pretty hardcore issues that right now, if they could get somebody, if there was somebody behind them or somebody in front of them saying, hey, don't screw up. Hey, if you screw up, I'm going to kick your butt. Hey, if you screw up, you know, you're going to fail and you don't want to fail. Having those things, those guys in the front and behind and beside them is what could be the difference a lot of times. There's guys that I know who that would be the difference they would make, is if they were able to have access to that kind of camaraderie, to that kind of communication, but more than that, to that kind of correction, that kind of admonition, right? That doesn't exist. By and large, it doesn't exist. What does exist right now is semi-professional veterans who are seeing their comrades beside them, in front of them, killing themselves, or seeing them taking their own life, and so then they're responding. And, you know, there's a lot of grunts who I know who shouldn't be making graphics. There's a lot of guys who I know who shouldn't be organizing events. There's a lot of guys who I know who maybe aren't good at that. But it doesn't matter if they're good at it or not, by and large, because they're doing something. They're responding. They're seeing a problem and they're doing something. They're taking action. And that's what a lot of people don't do. And so that's a good thing. And I definitely praise those veterans who are willing to stand up and say, you know what, no, this isn't all right. But I think that if you're willing to hear me say this, maybe it's better that you let somebody in your life who's going to tell you some frank things. Let somebody in your life who's going to say some things to you that's really hard to hear, like, don't eat so much, don't talk so much, don't say that. Why did you say that? Why are you doing that? Those kind of checks and balances are essential to growth, in my opinion. Without the appropriate balance of checks and corrections and admonitions, it can become really easy to get stuck in your own world. It can become really easy to get not just stuck in your own world, but stuck in your own way of thinking. And so you without ever approaching the problem in a new way with a new perspective, right? You forever view the problem the same way, as unconquerable, as unmaintainable, as unmanageable, as a mission unable to complete, right? But when you get a little bit higher, you can actually sometimes look down and see the difference, right? You can look down and see, oh, my problems aren't maybe that big of a problem. But sometimes it takes that person in your life to say, hey, dude, you're screwing up. And that's hard to hear, because I don't want to hear that a lot. I mean, like, if that was my entire relationship with someone where all they were doing was just correcting me and telling me I'm doing wrong, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time around that person, maybe. But then there's this other part of me that would be like, yeah, actually, I want to find that guy. I want to be around that dude, because that dude is the one that's going to, he's going to actually tell me the truth. That dude is the one in my life who's going to say, you're jacked up, pal. You're messed up. I'm not just going to let you keep doing the things you're doing. No, because you're going to hurt yourself. And that's not consistent with, this same ideology we've been talking about. And that ideology necessarily suggests or is predicated upon the idea that you are a lone ranger, that you're alone, that you got to do this stuff yourself. That's not true. You're not alone. You don't have to do it yourself. There's people out there who care about you. There's people out there who are willing to bend over backwards to tell you the hard things that you need to hear. So friends, if you don't have somebody in your life today to tell you that, let me be the one to tell you. So share this with your veteran friends, and here it goes, okay? Sometimes you're wrong. Just let that sink in for a minute. Sometimes you're doing things that aren't correct. That's a fact. And the next step from there, once you recognize that you're doing things that sometimes aren't the best, or sometimes you're doing things that aren't the best, make the changes. And if you're not sure what changes to make, well, gain some perspective. And if you're not sure how to do that, send me a message. I'd love to talk with you about some methods and ways that I've gained perspective, ways that I have gone to the proverbial top of the mountain and be able to look down at my tiny little problems and be like, oh, that ain't nothing. Jack, that ain't nothing. But these veterans, they feel alone. They feel like they're alienated. They feel like there's nobody out there that really gives a crap about them. And so they just go about their daily routine. And before you know it, they're killing themselves, or before you know it, they've destroyed their marriage, or before you know it, their kids are so old and are so experienced in the trauma of having a dad with PTSD without any apologies that they begin to think that's the right way to live, and then they perpetuate that same behavior. And then you see kids with secondary post-traumatic or tertiary post-traumatic stress disorder, where their symptoms are beginning to mimic those that have gone to combat and war, because they're learning from those that have went to combat and war that never got treatment and never got well. Dude, come on, wake up. Like, it's time that we recognize that this cycle of bullshit has got to stop right now with you and me. This isn't some motivational speech. It's real. It's like there's people who give a crap, who care about you, and when you go off and do the things you do that hurt those people, you know that you're doing it intentionally. Somewhere deep down inside, you know that you have within you the capability to not do those things. And we want to help bring out that better person in you. We want to help facilitate that kind of growth where you can be mature and responsible enough to tell that person in your life, I love you, I'm sorry, I messed up, and with your help, and maybe the help of some others, some professionals maybe, I'm never going to hurt you that way again, or I'm going to try. That's the goals. That's the focus. It can be really easy to lose sight of those that you love. It can be really easy to feel like you're not loved, but you are. You just can't see it right now. You can't realize it. You can't. Your love receptors are broken, man, and you need some inducement. And so, I'd love to help facilitate that. There's some excellent supplements, natural, legal, legitimate supplements that you can take that can help you sort of lubricate that process. 5-HTP is one of them. It's proven scientifically to help induce neurofunction and brainwave activity. There's all kinds of other things I could mention that I'm not going to right now, but you guys have got to learn to reach out to people. You've got to learn that you're not alone. And you've got to learn that ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the one responsible for the communication that you feel like isn't happening. Whatever that relationship is, you're responsible, not them. You are responsible to go to them. And it's not worth holding on to that anger. It's not. The apology that you for some reason won't go to, that you run from, that's the apology that's the breaking point from you getting better. And when you do it, you're going to ask yourself, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I say I'm sorry sooner? Why didn't I make a change sooner? Why didn't I do something different sooner? Why didn't I reach out to that person sooner? That's what you're going to ask. But there comes a point where those questions are void, they're unimportant, where it's like it really doesn't matter if you now think you should have done something. You didn't do something when it should have happened, and now because you didn't do it, you've got a problem. Now you're facing a bigger conundrum. Now your small issue that you could have dealt with a lot easier is now this mountain of a problem, and now you have to deal with this bigger problem than you did when you first started because of your negligence. So this is your message. This is your opportunity. This is your warning. This is your whatever. This is your reveille. If you are a human being and you're struggling with mental issues, whatever issues, but particularly relating to your time in service, reach out to somebody that you love, that loves you, and say, hi, how are you? I'm having a hard time. I would love to have a conversation about my feelings. That sucks. That sucks a lot. Having to say that crap to people. I don't want to say that to people, but you should. You should. And you can't blame them for not reaching out to you because they don't know. There's a high likelihood also that you're thinking about things in an ineffective way, that you're using a method of or a means of judgment that is imbalanced, that is based upon your offense or your hurt or your anger instead of based upon fact, logic, and reason, right? So you're using your hurt or your difficulty or whatever it is as like a filter, a screen in essence. And so everything you're seeing is through that filter and screen of hurt. Right? And so you are looking at this loving person next to you or near you or in your life, and you're saying, why are they such jerks? They don't understand. They're just meanies. They don't get it. Right? But what you don't understand is that you are being the jerk. You are the bully. You are the meanie. They're the ones being reasonable. They're the ones that are trying to communicate with you in love. But because of, a lot of times, up here, the filter that you're looking at things through makes things seem as though they are much more difficult than they actually are. Furthermore, not just much more difficult than they actually are, but way more impacted. And that's where that perspective thing can come into play. where you can get up a little bit higher above your situation and see the full picture of what you're trying to address, what you're trying to deal with. That's a military mindset. You're approaching your issue instead of straight on, like this sort of like red coats and blue coats mentality. No, you're going to get up high, you're going to do some guerrilla warfare, you're going to send out a couple 19 Deltas, some scouts, right? And then when the time's right, then when you're good, then you send out the ground pounders, then you send out the legs. But not until it's time. And a lot of times these guys are going into these battles thinking it's just, Braveheart time, swinging their axes, and it's like, no, you need to hold back a little. Maybe it's not time for the full cavalry yet, Maybe it's time for just a little bit of pullback. Hey, listen, I'm going to read this comment. I'm reading this. I'm doing this live, so those of you who are watching, I appreciate it. But if you're listening later, let me just tell you, you matter, right? You matter a whole bunch. So Joshua added, he said, "You're an amazing life coach. You're teaching Buddhist philosophy through your verbiage. I'm impressed." Nah, not a life coach, my man. Not a life coach at all. Just a human, just a dude that found a wellspring that I want to share with other people. That's it. That's all. I found the ladle. I found the ladle to the wellspring of maybe, I don't know, freedom, peace, joy. It's all about perspective. It's just being able to understand that you're not the biggest thing in this world. Being able to understand that really ultimately it doesn't really matter what you want, man. And when you refocus your goals and when you refocus your abilities, what you find out is that what you wanted was actually selfish. What you wanted was actually sort of not good, not helpful for you or for anybody else. And so you decide that based upon that, you're going to do something different. But that's a decision that you can't make if you're not calm and focused. That's a decision that you can't make unless you're not, if you're not in the moment and aware and mindful. That decision you're making is going to be based upon emotions, feelings, momentary proclivities, right? Just passing whims of emotion and feelings that have ultimately very little to do with what's really going on. I do that a lot. So that's why I don't feel like a shaman or a life coach in any capacity, because there's times when my wife will ask me to do things, or even today, where I lose my temper, where I where I necessarily say or do things that are unhelpful because of the way I'm viewing things. The filter with which I choose to view the world around me is what necessarily helps cultivate my worldview. So speaking of filters, one of the things I did this last week was I decided to attend a Christian fellowship. I found it to be beneficial. I found it to be helpful. In my past, I've found a lot of enjoyment in that kind of fellowship and intimacy. I've also seen a lot of legalism and cult-type behavior and a lot of garbage and maligning and hurtful people. But you know what? I found something else. I found something else out that's really beautiful, is that, that exists in very many social groups, not just churches, not just Christian churches in America. It exists. Hypocrisy exists. Frivolity, cult behavior, the inability to sort of control one's emotions. These things that, the desire to be on the top or, submit everybody else. And it's all coming from a wellspring of ego, mostly from a desire to try to make oneself look bigger than he is or she is. And that's where you just learn to begin that you don't matter as much as you think you do, and you matter significantly more than you think you do. That is the fact. That is the truth. You matter. You matter a lot to a lot of different people. You just don't realize it. You're just unable to sort of wrap your head around it. You're unable to see it through your hurt, through your sickness, through your illness. And you're unable to call it what it is, which is a weakness. It's a weakness. It's an inability to muster the strength. But a weakness is not analogous to some sort of permanently broken person or thing. It's just a weakness. It can be repaired or tolerated our entire lives. And that repair can happen through a variety of different ways. But just know that you're repairable. This isn't forever, and this isn't going to feel like this all the time. So if you're a veteran and you're interested in gaining some perspective, maybe come to a mountaintop, or maybe consider, researching substances that you can imbibe that can help you achieve what you're trying to achieve. Maybe consider that. I'm not saying that substances are going to be the only method. Maybe consider a faith-based system. Look, it's really ultimately about where you're where you're trying to go. What is your goal? Where are you trying to get to? Because when you know where you're trying to get to, you can keep your eyes off of the difficulties of the now and focus on the goal. Set small, achievable goals and keep achieving them. I also read Tim Ferriss's book called 4 Hour Workweek. That helped a lot. It was a great book. I also listened to a lot of Joe Rogan. A lot of his podcasts are helpful. He has on a lot of very interesting and intellectual individuals that I find to be very engaging. So I like that. There's a lot of supplements I take. There's all kinds of environments I put myself in on a purposeful daily basis. So I'm going to let you go because I don't want to drain my battery. You guys are awesome. TimothyLocklear.com for an archive of old podcasts. Sooner or later, I'm going to go through and pull all these old Facebook, like hour and a half, hour-long podcasts. I'm going to go and put them on the YouTube channel. But for now, go check out the old ones, guys. You're great. Thank you so much.